to this, the fourth episode of our series on the 22nd Mizmor, which is Dowd's fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurym. Today, the Hebrew world, following rabbinical protocol, is beginning their Passover holiday. They will celebrate Passover for 7 days. We began our celebration of Passover on Friday evening. The call was 6-1, half a dozen the other, as relative to the timing, because there was a sliver of renewing light on the moon's surface that would justify Friday evening, just as an observational method would prescribe last night, which we celebrated as matzah. But the real issue here is that Dowd began the 22nd Mizmor by telling us that our focus needs to be on matzah and understanding what matzah represents, which isn't even acknowledged in Judaism. They celebrate a very unusual version of Passover that is inconsistent with Yahweh's instructions and never even acknowledge that there is a Moed Mikre of matzah, or that it is followed by Bikurym. And as a result, they have no idea what it's worth, or what it conveys, what its benefits are, who fulfilled it, why, how it relates to the covenant. None of that means anything to them. And it's sad, because if you were to celebrate Passover correctly and not celebrate matzah, well, then your soul becomes immortal, but forever estranged from God, because we are perfected on matzah so that we can enter God's presence. And without capitalizing on matzah, that's impossible. So it really is a sad situation that is practiced in Judaism. It's why we're doing these programs and why it's so important that we focus on the 22nd Mizmor, because it opens in such a way that the first 5 statements are all focused on helping us understand matzah. See, matzah is the day that Dowd's nefesh soul was separated from Yahweh in Shamayim, because Dowd's soul took our guilt into Sheol, where it was deposited, never to be seen again, making us appear perfect in God's eyes. So this is the purpose of this day. And even in Christianity, where there is some passive acknowledgement that there may have been a lamb, although they don't want to ever mention Passover because that's too Torah, they have absolutely no interest in what transpired the next day, matzah, which again is the single most important day on our calendars. The most important day on Yahweh's calendars is his return on Yom Kippurim. The most important day on ours is Dowd's fulfillment of matzah, which neither Judaism nor Christianity discuss. In fact, the reason that Paul, when he conceived Christianity, didn't bother to mention Pesach and matzah is the fact that, well, you can't participate in Pesach unless you're circumcised as a man. And Paul wanted everyone to believe that if you're circumcised, that his Jesus couldn't even bother to save you. Of course, if there really had been a Jesus, he would have been circumcised. And of course, Paul would have been circumcised too, so he couldn't even be saved by his own religion. But let's not get into the details, because that would confuse people. And speaking of confusing, this broadcast is taking place on a Sunday. It is called Palm Sunday by the Twistians, and there's posts everywhere on social media encouraging people to have a wonderful and productive religious Palm Sunday. And I keep on saying, why would you do that? Why would you do that? I mean, think it through. There never was a Jesus. No Mr. Christ ever lived. At the very best, he is the product of identity theft. He's a crude counterfeit of the actual Messiah, Dowd David. You see Wookiee now. He thinks he has a rival for co-host, and he is insistent that he figures who that is. So you can't see behind the screen, but There is a screen right here, and Wookiee sees himself in it, and I don't think he recognizes that that's really him, or that he should just chill and enjoy the show. But you've got so many issues with this. First, no one named Jesus exists in the first century CE. The first Jesus didn't appear until the 17th century. There was never a Mr. Christ. Christ isn't a proper transliteration of the title Messiah, and Messiah isn't even a term that would be used in conjunction with the Passover lamb. And of course, Yahweh, who happens to be God, never once anywhere in the Torah and prophets ever mentions a Jesus or a Mr. Christ. And he speaks of Dowd, David, his beloved son, coming to fulfill Passover on many occasions. And Dowd himself speaks of fulfilling Pesach, Matzah Bikurym here in the 22nd Mizmor. And it's even more amazing that Christians would claim that their myth is the Son of God when the only person God said, "He is my son, I am his father," well, that would be Dowd, David. And the only person that Yahweh specifically said, "I'm anointing him with my own special oil," and had him anointed 3 times at his instructions for the 3 lives that he would live. Same guy, Dowd, David. The one person Yahweh said, "I'm going to bring back to be king of the universe," it would be Dowd, David. When Yahweh said there's through inspired Yeshayah to speak of the son who is given, well, he also mentioned his name as Dowd, David. This Mizmor, the 22nd, which speaks of the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurym in 33 CE, it was written by and spoken in first person by, you got it, Dowd. So you have one guy who is everywhere, given credit for everything that's important, and the other who is never mentioned. And so we are not in a position where anybody who is reasonable is going to believe that there was a Jesus. But when you tell people this, oh boy, does it make them mad. And when you say, well, take it up with Yahweh. He never mentioned your Jesus, and he spoke all of these things profoundly about his beloved son, Dowd. So as we pick up the story, we were in Mizmor 22:7, and it reads, "And all of those who see me, they deride and mock me, speaking unintelligently about me and disparaging me. They shoot off their mouths while they shake their heads." And that is exactly what I experienced today. If I'm writing to a Christian, the very thing that I will see is that let's see if we can get Wookiee back off of being trapped here. There you go. Put it back in reverse. Yeah, away there, buddy. Okay. If I'm speaking to a Christian, trying to help them recognize the truth so they're not blinded by their religious faith and misled, and point out, listen, this is the kindest, most compassionate gift you could possibly be offered. The very realization that not only can I, but I actually do prove 1,000 times over that the Christian religion is a fraud, that the Christian New Testament is a fraud, releasing you from it so you're prepared to actually know God and save your soul. That's a tremendous gift. Oh, but curse words and swear words, and oh my goodness, you'd think that I was taking away their favorite toy. Never, by the way, any retort. Never anybody saying, no, you're wrong. He's not a counterfeit of Dowd, and I can prove it. Never anybody saying, no, he didn't come and start his own religion. Nope, I can prove Paul told the truth. No one ever. I've never, ever been challenged on anything that I have said to disprove the Christian religion, ever. Well, there's a reason for that. It can't be done. But they certainly do deride the Son of God. They certainly do speak unintelligently about what Dowd has done. And they've done the worst thing of all. They've positioned a myth, a false Messiah, in his place. And they worship this fraud as if the fraud were a god. Yeah, religion does horrible things to people's minds. So as we continue our analysis, it has been, well, this way from the beginning, and nothing is likely to ever change. The world over, everyone speaks unintelligently about Dowd, the Son of God, the Messiah, the returning king, the great prophet, the Yahowah, the Passover lamb, and everything he represents. He is by a wide margin the least understood and the most underappreciated man in human history. Now, it was one thing for the Roman invaders to mock him. Rome was good at that. They and the church, they inspired, they never knew any better. They were and remain ignorant of Yahowah, his Torah, the Berith covenant, the Mikra, invitations to be called out and meet. And so stupid is as stupid does. They continue to be belligerent toward God, unintelligently stammering while slandering and deriding not only God, but his beloved Son, antagonizing him. And yet they think that they are worshiping God and that they are telling the truth about God. They're saving the world for God. And all they're doing is pissing him off. And that's putting it mildly. I wonder if we're going to get the pretty Miss Leah on screen making her comments over there, because I know we have the capability, and we have Rich here with the trigger finger button that can make it so. So to make matters worse, the Roman Catholic Church, Leah's favorite. Oh. No. Yes, when Leah was in grade school, she was sent home crying because the kids at grade school condemned her for killing their Jesus. You're a Jew. You killed.
No, they punched me in the nose.
Oh, they punched her in the nose.
Punched me in the nose on the playground.
Okay. Rich, you need to bring Leah on camera. She's explaining that she was punched in the nose by the kids who were Roman Catholics and claimed that as a Jew, she killed their God. And
I'd do it again.
And she would say yes, and she says, you're right, and I would do it again. Now, and of course, if I were them, if I were her, I would say, and since I was able to kill your God, shouldn't you be worshiping me?
Worship me.
Or maybe I'm going to kill you. Yeah, of course, this is just the dumbest thing in the world. Okay, so even Christians believe that the death of their God brings life, that it was by their God dying for them that they're going to live. Isn't that their mantra? So therefore, didn't the Jews bring life to the Christians? Because they killed the God that brings life by his death? Now, the fact of the matter is, he did fulfill Passover. Is there ever been a successful fulfillment of Passover where the lamb doesn't die?
Nope, never.
So,
one and done.
So the lamb must die, and therefore, if the Jews actually did what the Roman Catholics and the Christian New Testament claim and crucified him, which would have been quite a feat because it was the Romans that used crucifixion, not the Jews. But had they done that, then they would have done a great service to all humanity, because the Passover lamb must die for there to be any benefit. It is a sacrificial death after all.
No, it's more fun to worship a dead God.
Okay, well, that is the nature of Christianity, the symbol of Christianity. Nothing would they antagonize God more than to have the most popular religion in the world be based upon identity theft and a crude counterfeit of his beloved son and what he did for all humanity, and then to create a religion under the symbol of a dead God on a stick.
Shishka God.
Oh, but that's not the only way they present God. You could say, oh yeah, they also show him as a baby in the arms of the Queen of Heaven and the Mother of God, who of course is Asherah, and then they even celebrate their great bodily resurrection, which is the dumbest idea in human history, and we'll speak to that in just a second, on Ishtar Day, as in Asherah, honoring the Queen of Heaven and the Mother of God. And then they even come up with a mommy for Jesus, and they name her Miriam, embittered, rebellious, contentious, which is what the name means. And they ascribe those qualities, which are the qualities that are renounced throughout the Torah and prophets, of the pagan goddess Asherah, the Queen of Heaven, the Mother of God, and the Madonna and Child. It really is repulsive. So they'll put the baby Jesus in the arms of a pagan goddess, and then they'll show at the end of his life as a dead God on a stick. Dumb diddly dum dum. Well, it's not just dumb. That's just it's just flat out repulsive. Well, on the notion of bodily resurrection, first of all, did in the fulfillment of Passover, because I've studied this, I've translated it, but maybe I missed something here. Can you tell me if there was an example, maybe one of the places that the Jews celebrated Passover? Can you tell me if there was an example where after the Passover lamb was prepared for and butchered for the meal, in accordance with the Torah's instructions, and then roasted over the flame and cooked and then consumed by the family, making for a lovely meal, and then with the remaining portions of the Passover lamb incinerated that night, the portions they did not eat, the portions really that were inedible as well. Does the Passover lamb perform a miracle and come back to life?
Hell no. It would be
creepy. That would, well, yes, it would be. For if you could eat your food, I guess that would be having your cake and eat it too. So from now on, if you eat, say you like salmon, or out here we have mahi or wahoo. After you've prepared your fish, you grill your fish, saute it however you want to have your fish. You have a lovely meal with your fish, and then the fish comes back to life on your plate, and you get to toss it back into the sea.
Oh my God! Now we know how Jesus fed so many.
Yeah, that's how he did. That's how he did it. See, so if you have the fishes, you get to eat the fishes, and then the fishes become fishes again, and you get to eat the fishes again. That is how the miracle happened.
It's all about the resurrection.
So yeah, so and as a bull, I'm particularly happy to hear that, because McDonald's has served a lot of hamburgers, and rather than the bull staying dead, the bull is coming back to life, because that's what happens. Okay, beyond just the stupidity of that, let's go one step further. The body of said sacrificial victim, bludgeoned by imperial Rome, was so horrific that any association with that body would have been ghoulish and repulsive. And so we can be quite certain that there's not going to be, that body is never going to be seen again. That is why the Passover lamb, the remains, are incinerated that night. It's a gruesome sight. And bringing that repulsive, mutilated body back, what a waste. Now, if you're going to say, oh, but the body was healed, then why did it go through all that torment? And how would you even recognize it if it was healed? What proof would it be that it was the same body if after enduring all that, it comes back as if nothing had happened? Isn't that ludicrous? Now, let's now pretend that we have some mix between, well, torn apart and not torn apart, and possibly recognizable, but not recognizable. If you're going to transition from mortal to immortal, the first thing that has to happen is you need to rid yourself of your physical body. If you passed away and all that was left of you was your soul and your body is discarded, then if you have a covenant relationship with Yahweh, you become a spiritual based being and you have a direct access to Shamayim and Yahweh. But going back into a physical body would mean instantly you are precluded from entry into heaven. You can't enter heaven with a physical body. You can't even get off of this rock we call Earth and go, currently beyond the moon in a physical body. Physical bodies are an enormous liability. They decay. They are all caught in the ordinary flow of time. And the restrictions on them are so huge that going to a physical body after death, well, anybody that's had a near-death experience and they've experienced this moment of what it's like to be without your body will scream to high heaven, good God, don't give me another one of those things.
No.
Leah's one of the people that has had that experience. I would let her tell you the story, but she's not on camera, so that's just the way it goes. So the transition from death in a physical body to eternal life must discard that body and follow Einstein's formula, V equals mc squared, with energy being equivalent to matter multiplied by the square of the speed of light. And that's how these things are equivalent, but so enormously different. So that's the reality of it. A transition back to a physical body would not be a sign of conquering death. It would be a sign of losing to death. It would not be a sign of superiority, but inferiority. It wouldn't be a signal that this being is God, but instead that this being is man. So it is pure nonsense. The reason, of course, it was popularized is because the first to write about any of this was Paul. And he began writing in 52 CE, which was 20 years thereafter. And he wrote in places that were very distant from Jerusalem. He was not an eyewitness to the events. And he wrote 2 decades later and wrote to people who were even further removed from these events, the first being to Galatia, which was north of his hometown in what is today Turkey. And then he wrote to the Thessalonians and the Corinthians in Greece, a long, long way from where these things happened. So he conveyed to them what they wanted to hear, which is that this myth of Jesus would be very much like Dionysus. Dionysus has an annual resurrection. There are the festival days of Dionysus where his resurrection is celebrated. Same time of year, by the way. He's born at the same time of year, and he has his resurrection at the same time of the year. And it was true, really, of all of the Son of God, pagan gods in human history. They were always celebrating their resurrections. So, this is the truth. Whether you want to hear it or not, it is what you need to know. So as we continue, it's, one thing for Dowd, and this is the thing that is most tragic for me, to have made this sacrifice, to have endured this agony on behalf of his people as this Passover lamb, and then to carry our guilt into Sheol and enter hell with our guilt, separating himself from the Father. And then to have no one recognize, no one appreciate, no one acknowledge what he has done. It's really the greatest travesty in all of human history. to have this great gift go unacknowledged. And then to have the most popular religion in human history make a mockery of what you've done by having a Dionysian dying and resurrected God who was born to the Queen of Heaven and the Mother of God save people by being killed and then damning those who didn't kill him on behalf of those that did.
Pretty grotesque.
It's pretty grotesque. It is indeed. It's egregious to have attributed all that Dowd accomplished to a crude counterfeit, a product of identity theft, a misnomer, a myth. It's horrendous. Now that we are acknowledging that these Psalms were written in the first person because Dowd endured this ordeal for our benefit and wrote about it 1,000 years before he endured it, I'm convinced that this next pronouncement occurred as it is written. And what that means is that Dowd was immensely proud of his father's name, as am I. You will never hear me speak of God without saying Yahowah. And Dowd would have been identical in this regard. So much so that it is apparent that he used the pseudonym, I think, Yahusha, to depict what he and Yahowah would accomplish together. He would have, I don't think, referred to himself as that. I think he would have said that Yahowah is responsible for our deliverance and salvation. And that is Yahusha. It would have been appropriate, not only because Yahusha was Moshe's successor and followed in his predecessor's footsteps, it would say that really that Dowd walked right out of the pages of the Torah. To use Yahusha even in passing, because Yosha ben Nun was the successor of Moshe, it would have been saying, I am walking right out of the pages of the Torah. Now, the other part of that, of course, is that Yahowah specifically says that it's going to be Dowd that fulfills Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurym, and that Dowd is his beloved son, and that he's coming back as Dowd, and there'd be no reason for the most famous man in God's story not to identify himself by his name, since he wrote, for example, this eyewitness account in his name. Well, the fact is that Dowd was courageous. He was bold, and no doubt he would have told all that who would have listened that what specifically he was going to do, why it would occur, and who was going to make it possible. But his audience, like the praying zombies of the religious today, were just too busy praying to listen. So these are quotes from these mocking and demeaning individuals. Many could have been Yehudim. Some could have been Romans. But for these citations to be stated this way, it means that Dowd would have had to convey this during the 3.5 years that he lived amongst them prior to enduring this fulfillment. It says, you have chosen to be rolled away, to be removed, to be sent away to Yahowah. Galal. Galal is a loaded term here. It rolled away is not a concept that we would use typically in English nomenclature, but it meant a lot to Hebrews listening. For example, when Moshe and the children of Israel approached the Jordan and they looked into the promised land, this concept of Galal was mentioned, of rolling away the obstacles so that they might enter. It means to be taken to go through the process of being delivered. So you have chosen to be delivered, to be removed, and to be sent away to and really from Yahweh. There's a moment that he'll be sent away from Yahweh and a moment that he will return to Yahweh, both rolled away and removed and also return to Yahweh. The other part of that, this galal that is meaningful is that the place outside of the Damascus Gate, and it's called the Damascus Gate because the roadway from Jerusalem to Damascus would go through that gate. You go through that gate and you walk some 700 steps, and where you will find yourself is this wall that is a limestone wall on the part of Mount Moriah that was not taken down to form the Temple Mount. And part of the stone was carved off of it, I'm sure, to even create some of the footings for the Temple Mount. And so that's where you come to it. Today it's the Jerusalem bus station. And you look up above it, and what you see, in fact, it'd be over this shoulder here, yes. Above me, before that, right above the finger as it was pointing there, above the, below that meteorite there is a piece of white limestone. Miss Leah, I think, is going to grab it for me, yes. This piece of limestone came off of what's called Golgotha, based on the same word. And when you look at the encarpment, you see in the recesses and the shadows, you see what clearly looks like a skull. And it was called the place of the skull. And this is the encarpment that the top of it is the part of Mount Moriah that was not cut away. And it was up against this encarpment that Dowd would have been crucified by the Romans. And so Galal speaks of the very place where this stone was taken. I think when I go back, I might take this back with me. I do know that wherever I go, I'm going to keep it with me. To know that my king suffered such that this rock was there at the time. Sentimental to me. So you have chosen this place of rolling away, Galal for Golgotha. You're going to be removed. You're going to be sent away to and from Yahweh. You wanted this to take place. You told us you wanted this to take place. So here you are. And the other aspect of rolling away is that Galal was used in the concept of rolling away one's sin, rolling away one's guilt. And so it is, there's three meanings here, all of which are appropriate to the ear of those who were attuned to the Hebrew mindset and lexicon at the time. To Gaal means to roll away our guilt. It means to move in a direction that is important to you, a direction with a goal, to cross the Jordan into the promised land. And it spoke of the encarpment where this piece of limestone came from, where Dowd was crucified by the Romans. The next statement was, so let's see if he wants to rescue him. What they didn't understand is that they were on the wrong day. The Passover lamb is not rescued. And so Dowd's bashar body, his corporeal body, would succumb to the abuse of the Romans. It would die as the Passover lamb. And there would be no rescuing his body. It wouldn't serve its purpose if that were to occur. So they were just absolutely mistaken. They we're thinking in the human sense of the Romans are killing him, and therefore if his God doesn't come and rescue him now, then we're going to mock him. But if there's God was allowing him to be there and endure this without reason, then what kind of a God would that be? I mean, it's just very much like the Jesus dying on a cross. Unless you can come up with a reason that sacrifice is prescribed somewhere to have some benefit, then it's nothing but a ghoulish spectacle, and a God that would put his son through a ghoulish spectacle like that for no purpose is sadistic. The problem for Christianity, isn't it? Because they never explain why. What's the benefit of that occurring? Well, Yahowah explains what the benefit was. Dowd figured it out. The Passover lamb opens the doorway to life. The body is sacrificed. Dowd could have cared less about giving up his body. The Bashar has no value to him. He had already spent 1,000 years in Shamaim without one, liberated from it. The last thing he wanted was the burden of this body. Yeah, I'm sure he would have preferred for it to be done in a more, less savage way, but that was part of the whole process, is to make certain we understood how really powerful this sacrifice was. It would be the same for me as the Adam of Parah. Yes, a quick blow would be more suitable, more merciful, but it needs to be serious for people to pay serious attention to it. And that's what happened here. So Dowd volunteered to do this because he knew that he was opening the door to life by the sacrifice of something that was meaningless and useless to him, his corporeal body. And the last thing he would want is to have that corporeal body rescued. It would defeat the whole purpose. He is going to have his nefesh soul rescued, which is the whole purpose of the Ruach of Yahowah, escorting his soul with our guilt into Sheol, protecting his soul there, and returning Dowd's nefesh soul to Yahowah and Shamaim, without the body, of course. So let him choose to deliver and save him. Surely he desires to be with him. They're mocking him without understanding. It's the same thing that you would expect in Judaism or Christianity. As a matter of fact, if I could recreate this exact scene in Jerusalem, and maybe like with a hologram, and be able to show the world that it was Dowd who was there, provide his pedigree, read this narrative that Dowd provided at the time that it was occurring, and reenact this via a hologram in Jerusalem in the right spot, we'd have the exact same statement. Oh, let him deliver, and if he likes him, then he should save him. He wants to be with him, so the very fact that he's suffering there is proof that he was all for naught. We'll go on with our lives. We'll go and create a false Messiah. We don't like this one anyway. He dies. The death of the Passover lamb fulfills the promises of the Torah. It is the doorway to life. It offers the first benefit of the covenant. Without that door being opened, there's no entry into Shamaim. There's no entry into God's home. There is no life beyond this one. So he was there not to be delivered. He was there to deliver the promises, not to be delivered from them. It's a shame that people don't think. The implications, of course, here are earth-shattering. It is yet another nail in the coffin of Christianity and also Judaism. The lone eyewitness account, the single credible presentation, the only inspired testimonial of the fulfillment of Pesach Passover reveals that those who were there had heard the Messiah tell them that he trusted and relied upon Yahowah. He knew that his soul would survive and be delivered from this ordeal, not on this day, but on Bikurym. And that's why he volunteered to do it. And it's likely that if these were Jews, they had no more understanding of Bikurym than they did of Matzah, and they thought that the whole show was Pesach and couldn't figure out why the Messiah wasn't being saved on Pesach. Same problem today. You're focused on Passover and you don't know that the main show is Matzah and the deliverable is Bikurym. Without having a program, they didn't know what the act was delivering. And so, the fact is that Yahowah's desire to rescue and save us as his covenant family from our mortality requires this sacrifice, and it necessitates what occurred on Matzah so we can celebrate the result on Bikurym. Tonight, of course, will be for us our celebration of Bikurym, as last night was our celebration of Matzah. Dowd was simply going through this process before the rest of us and on behalf of the rest of us. Now, to have these numbskulls recorded saying these things, Dowd spoke about his relationship with Yahowah. Yep, that's what it means. There's no other way for this to have been spoken that way. And yet, there isn't even the slightest hint of Yahowah's name, or of how Yahowah intended to deliver the soul of the Pesach El to fulfill Matzah and after Bikurym anywhere in rabbinical lore or from Christians. Not a mention. Dowd was there fulfilling it and giving credit to Yahowah, and is even recorded by the eyewitnesses acknowledging Yahowah, and yet the numbskulls that created Christianity and subsequently Judaism can't even say God's name. The idiots here were saying God's name. They knew it because Dowd told it to them. And the religions that mock him, rob him, and us of this great gift won't say it. Other than what's recorded in Mizmor, Psalms 22. Again in the 88th Mizmor. In Yashayah, Isaiah 41 and 53. And the explanations of how Dowd came to know that he would fulfill Passover and why God agreed that it was the right decision that his son had made in the first 30 Mizmor, as well as Dowd's pronouncement as Gabriel through Daniel in the 9th chapter. There really are no other inspired or credible eyewitness accounts of the fulfillment of Yahowah's mikra, his invitations to be called out and meet. Apart from these prophecies, we would know very little about how Matzah was fulfilled and done to unleaven our souls, or how Bikurym was celebrated as the result. We know these things because of what Dowd and the prophets wrote about them. And yet, why are we the first to share them? They're not shared in any Jewish synagogue or by any Jewish writer. They're not shared by any Christian theologian or in any Christian church. Not a word of any of this that we're sharing with you. Why? This Mizmor psalm and the others that I have mentioned have been available for 3,000 years. Some only 2,700 years.
I know the answer.
So why?
Because they have their own gods.
Well, they do. I don't know if she's on mic yet or we're get her on camera, but her answer was because they have their own God. Yeah, they do. But the problem with having your own God is your own God is made in your image. He likes you a lot because, well, you like yourself a lot.
That is the problem.
That's a problem. When you make a God in your own image, he's wee little puny. And that's not good. Because there is a real God and he is really big. He's really influential. He's really powerful. He makes a tremendous difference. And he orchestrated all of this with his son to save the covenant family. And by worshiping a God you created in your own image, a man God, you're spitting in his face.
Well, they hate the old God of the Jews.
Well, she's still talking in the background there, saying they hate the old God of the Jews. Well, it's true that in Christianity, the God of the Torah is despised. That's why Paul came up with this false notion of an Old Testament, a testimony of a deceased God. Paul's basic premise was that nothing God said should be taken literally. In fact, the only way that you can convey anything that the God of his Old Testament said is to take it out of context and to twist it to the point that it no longer says what God actually said because, well, God didn't know what he should say because, well, he failed. He could not save anyone. And so as an utter failure, God turned to this sexual pervert and an egomaniac that was demon-possessed. Sexual pervert's by his own admission. Egomaniac is also by his own admission. Demon-possessed is also by his own admission.
And three.
And 3 out of 3. And then told that this pervert and egomaniac, demonic individual, that since, well, I haven't been able to figure out a way to save people, I want you to come up with a way to save people. Yep, that's my deal here. I'm a total failure, but you're going to speak for me and come up with an entirely different plan that it contradicts everything I've ever said, and I'm authorizing you to do that for the entire world, while at the same time, you reneging on every promise I've made to my people and going one step further, you actually demonizing my people. That's what we're going to call this new religion. That's the plan. And if you are stupid enough to believe that, well, they call you a Christian. He's not being nice. Yes, I am being nice. Well, since this accounting reveals that the onlookers in this day in Jerusalem said these things using these words, and since this comes from an inspired text that Dowd wrote about his crucifixion 1,000 years before he endured it, many centuries before crucifixion even existed, before Rome even existed, it means that's what they said. It means this is trustworthy and true. And since there is no prophecy and the New Testament is not even actual eyewitness testimony, it's hearsay, and it's hopelessly contradictory, then it isn't true. This realization destroys the narrative claimed in the Christian New Testament and in the Talmud Yerushalmi. And since their story is entirely different, you can either believe them or you can trust Dowd. Those are your choices. If you choose to trust Dowd, then you're going to have to trust Dowd's God, and that would be YAHOWAH. And if you trust Dowd and his God, YAHOWAH, you're going to have to trust in what is revealed in what's called the Old Testament, the Tanakh, the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. And if you do that, then you've got to dispose with your Christian New Testament because the message is the opposite of one another. One simply contradicts the other. And that puts you in a really bad spot because Christianity is dependent upon misappropriating citations from the Torah, prophets, and Psalms to give credibility to their lie. And without it, they have no credibility. And with it, well, if you actually look up the references that they pilfered, They have no credibility. It is a lose-lose game. So do you prefer the musings of men without prophetic credentials? Or would you rather rely upon the testimony of somebody who is irrefutable and the fact that they were inspired by God? Speaking of events 1,000 years in advance of them occurring, we have copies of the 22nd Mizmor that date more than a century before Dowd fulfilled this. And it's actually a scientific depiction of crucifixion, which was not known at the time. And since he says this, and it's proven to be prophetically accurate, it means there is a 0% possibility that Christianity is true. That's why they don't quote the 22nd Mizmor, even though it is the single most important document to quote if you want to explain what happened on Passover, Pesach, and Matzah in 33 CE. Now, should there be some confusion on this matter, the Talmud, both the Jerusalem and Babylonian editions, are strictly rabbinical affairs. They recorded rabbis debating what they want Jews to believe, the Torah says, as if they are better communicators than God, and they are really whacked out in their interpretations. In fact, I really wasn't fully apprised as to how crazy the arguments are and the stories are of the rabbis until, I turned Prophet of Doom into 5 volumes of goddamn religion and decided that I would demonstrate, prove that most of the stories that are cited in the Quran are pilfered from the Talmud. And so, all of it that appears in the Quran are not just pilfered from the Talmud and twisted from there. These stories are insane. I mean, it's like somebody discovered drugs a very long time ago, and they wrote the Talmud while tripping because it's nuts. And I put them side by side, the Talmudic account and the Quranic account. The problem with the Quran is the Talmud. So if they're better communicators than God, then I tell you what, we have a God that is completely clueless. Well, given all they had to work with to discern the truth, to call these men sages, well as to elevate dumb and dumber to Mensa status. This is not to say that even when it comes to what is obvious, finding the truth is not effortless. I'm responsible for finding tens of thousands of unique insights that are unheralded and were unknown to humanity prior to revealing them in these last 24 years. And yet the single greatest discovery that I have made during that time, I did not fathom until I was 22 years into this process, although it was things that I mused about, hinted about, even spoke to some degree about 7 or 8 years prior to that. It's to recognize that Dowd served as the Passover lamb is far more than reading the 22nd Mizmor in first person. Because you have to understand why Dowd, or how Dowd figured out that he should do this. You then have to figure out why Dowd, after he recognized that this was the right thing for him to do, why he decided to do it. What was his motivation? Then you have to come to understand why Yahweh would accept this plan and proposal from his son, whom he loved. Why would he allow him to endure this? And until you can put all of those pieces together and then come to understand specifically how Passover opens the door to life and how matzah perfects the children of the covenant and how Bikurym then enables us as children of the covenant to follow the lead of the firstborn of God, Dowd, and how these three things enable the five benefits of the covenant until you can put all the pieces together and then look at every prophecy pertaining to this and to see how they all focus on the same moment for the same reason, then you're not in a position to share the greatest discovery. Because the greatest discovery is presented in words, and those words need to be buttressed. And that's why it took so long to deliver this message. So, as I've admitted, while I had privately discussed the idea that Dowd was the individual who fulfilled Chag Matzah, it wasn't until I understood his motivations that I was able to appreciate why Yahweh allowed him to do so in this horrific and way, but serving heroically and compassionately. Even then, before publicly acknowledging it, I had to test the validity of this conclusion against every prophecy pertaining to the fulfillment of the Mikra, to verify that they were consistent with what we're reading here. And, this required going back through the first 30 Mizmor with a fine-tooth comb. And that's the relatively easy part, because the real work is in coming to know and accept what the Torah says about the Moed Mikra, while developing an understanding of how the Nabi portrayed them in conjunction with Dowd. And then one must weave what we learn about the Mizmor into discoveries to develop a complete picture. And that is really the most interesting part. It's the reason why there are so many hundreds of prophecies pertaining to what I'm doing, because this was a really important step towards the reconciliation of Yisrael, to the fulfillment of Shabuah, Towrah, Kippurim, and Sukkah. Because without this determination, they aren't fulfilled. And that's why Dowd wrote so vociferously what I'm doing for you here. It's why Yahweh, and particularly through Yashayah, wrote a treatise on how to perform in this role. You can look at the numbers and say, there are X accounts and Facebook pages and YouTube channels with millions of subscribers. And yet here we are with our 2,500 on Facebook and a little over 1,000 on X, and between all of our channels, maybe 2,500 on YouTube in the 90 days we've been at this, 100 days. And you can say, you're a 70-year-old man who's doing a blog and telling us about this, and you've not had a single one of your blogs go viral, nor have you had any posts that went viral. On X, I've made 10,000 of them to encourage people to listen to this message. There are now, 350 hours of YAHOWAH blog available, plus all the shorts of them. And so you might say, so if this is the most important discovery on earth, why do so few people know about it? Why do so few people care about it? And that really is a painful answer. And I'm here to tell you, it isn't my fault. It isn't Dowd's fault. It isn't the fault of the prophets. It isn't Yahweh's fault either. It's your fault. Yisrael, you're to blame. You told your God to go away and shut up 3,400 years ago. He told you not to be religious, and yet you carried on being religious. He told you not to be political, and there you are being political. You're even a house divided between your religiosity and your zeal for politics. You erased Yahweh's name. You took him out of your lives. You did everything you possibly could to renounce everything that Dowd said and did. Not one of you capitalizes upon his sacrifice, acknowledges what Dowd did on Pesach, Matzah Bikurym. And you're so goddamn hard-headed about it that you won't even consider the truth. You're so arrogant that when someone looks you in the eye and say, this is the truth directly from God through prophecy, which is inarguable, you'll, oh, I got other things to do. Oh, we mentioned Yahweh's name. Well, I don't want to go there. No, I got a post to make. I've got religious events to celebrate. I've got politicians to praise. I've got
Funerals
popularity to go pursue. I want to be an influencer. It's your fault. Truth's been there the whole time. Been there 3,000 years. You didn't need me to find it, but you couldn't do it without me. That's just the bottom line. It's been there for you to see, all of it, for between 2,700 and 3,000 years. All laid out from your prophets, from your God, in your language, in your book. And not one of you could figure it out, not in 2,700 to 3,000 years. And you did everything to denounce the truth. You even went after the false Messiah of Christianity with a false Messiah of your own, and that idiot is the one who caused the diaspora. And he is the founder of your religion. How stupid can you be? And you still won't wake up. And when somebody says your problem is that you erased Yahweh's name and you're denying your Messiah and King, it doesn't resonate with you. I can write personal, heartfelt, logical, evidence-based letters to the most influential of you, and it is like the rabbis that bang their heads against that stupid wall. I don't know what's harder, the stone or their heads. But that's where you are. And things are going to get really nasty. Oh, you're so full of yourselves now. Look what you turned Gaza into a demolition zone. And boy, you sure taught those Gazans and Hamas a lesson. Oh, and you had the great buzzer success with Hezbollah. And you bomb Iran. Oh, man. And you got your guy in the White House. You're full of yourselves. You've gone from not even recognizing that the IDF turned out to be a complete and utter bust when it came to 10/7. And then even when I told you in an open letter that by entering Gaza, you're going to make a bad situation worse, by the time you're done, you're going to turn the whole world against you, and there's going to be more jihadists in Gaza than there were before you went there, which is exactly what happened. And you're still full of yourselves. And insane, you're going back into Gaza expecting a different result. Celebrating every time a Muslim is killed, not knowing that you're making a bad situation worse. Not a single one of you are willing to recognize that your enemy is not Hamas, it's Islam. And that Islam is able to do this to you and will do it again. Because you're still not willing to accept Yahweh. Oh, you give great lip service to Hashem's on our side. No, he's not. He wants to be. He wants to be. But his name is Yahweh. Until you embrace his name and return to his Torah, not the goddamn Talmud. Until you return to the truth about your actual Messiah, the Son of God, Dowd, your returning king. It's going to be really, really rough for you. And you're about to enter the time of Jacob's troubles, where it's going to be worse than at any time in your history, worse than the Holocaust. You're going to have your backs up against the wall. And largely you've done this to yourselves. Rabbis created Christianity, rabbis created Judaism, rabbis created Islam. And Jews are responsible to a large degree for the popularization of progressive mentality that's serving as the pimps of Muslims today. And you're a house divided in Israel, protesting against yourselves, blaming your government for the abduction of your citizens as opposed to the religion that took them and tortured them. Believing a foreign president as he was your Messiah when he has given you every reason to know that he should not be trusted. Even today, when the reports came out that he lied about what was taking place, wasn't in Iran. Nope, there was no direct negotiations with the Iranians, no big meeting with the Iranians. No, it was an omen. And there was a couple of hours of independent classroom time between the Omani discussions with the Iranians and then with the United States delegation, and a couple of minutes after it was all over between the completely unqualified Witkoff and the Iranian representative. And it was so pro-Iranian that they are celebrating the fact that there was no mention of the destruction of their nuclear ambitions. It was worse than a waste of time. And it did not happen as Trump said it would. He lied to you. And your fate is hanging in the balance, because an Iran with a bomb is lethal to Israel. And they have enough fissionable material now to make an armada of bombs. They have the missile technology. They don't need to buy much time. And Trump played right into their hands, and his ego will not allow him to admit that he can't do the deal. Every which way, he has proven that he cannot be trusted. And the prophets tell us that he's going to be the next Neville Chamberlain, that he's going to sacrifice Israel. And the reasons are clear, and I've written about them. I hope you read them. But between now and then, I wish to say thank you for listening. This is a tough message to recognize that the most proclaimed of all Israelites, the king who unified Israel, the king who defended Israel in 66 battles, the king who slew the giant, the king who defeated the Philistines, the king who acquired Jerusalem, the king who bought the Temple Mount, the king who was beloved by Yahweh, anointed 3 times by Yahweh, the chosen one of Yahweh, the king who was a great prophet, volunteered to lay down his life so that you might live, volunteered to carry your guilt into Sheol so you might be perfect, volunteered to be the first to become part of the covenant family as God's firstborn son, so that we might follow. And you denied him and yourselves of all of this. Please think it through. It's time to change. I am Craig Winn, the man from Edom, and this has been an edition of the YAHOWAH blog, delivered here as Matzah transitions into Bikurym. Good day.